everyone. We're here at the New Ulm Forum with our special guest, Attorney General Keith Ellison, the man right here to my right.
Good to see y'all.
We're going to learn more about his work and some of the things that his office has been doing. And as you know, the League is a nonpartisan organization. We work to empower voters, and we have positions and platforms that we champion so that we can create a better, more representative Minnesota for all. So we're going to jump right in.
Well, you got to be nonpartisan, but I'm not. And I love the League, man. You guys are great.
You do you.
I'm gonna do me.
So tell us first and foremost a little bit about you and your background and what your office does.
Right. So my name is Keith Ellison. I'm the people's lawyer. My official title is Minnesota Attorney General. And what I do is I help people afford their lives, live with dignity, safety, and respect. Basically, I run a law firm. I run the state's law firm. And what we do is we have a few different lines of business. One thing we do is consumer protection. So if you signed up for, I don't know, some sort of a cable service or Wi-Fi, and you're not getting it, let us know. We'll get into it for you.
You'll make sure we get it.
Yes, we will. And we also we protect the rights of the people of Minnesota. We protect the state of Minnesota. So we represent every commission, every board, every state agency. Department of Corrections, we're their lawyers. Departments of Veterans Affairs, departments of the Pollution Control Agency, we're all their lawyers. DNR, we're their lawyers. And we also do a lot of criminal work. We have a county attorney system in Minnesota, so your local county attorney is responsible for prosecuting most crimes, but sometimes they need help and they're legally allowed to ask us to intervene. So we end up doing about 100 or more cases for them a year. Usually they're the bigger, uglier ones, the homicides, the serious ones. But we're happy to help. We also prosecute people for Medicaid fraud. So we do that. We help protect the roadways, because although we don't do, the city attorneys do the DUIs, but we do the civil licensing if you get a DUI. So our people will show for that. And you know what we do that touches every Minnesotan is we do utility rate stuff.
That matters.
Yeah. So
I want my utility bill to be less.
Low. So we're the ones who defend you against the big companies who always want a rate increase for one thing or another. So that's what we do.
So you're not busy?
Oh no, we're just sitting around.
you don't. I just you run through
hands behind the head.
Hundreds of things.
Well, I got a lot of good people I work with. We have a staff of around 450 people.
Okay.
All of them are very busy. Nobody doesn't have enough to do. We also found ourselves doing a lot of federal accountability work.
And we're going to get into that.
Yeah. Well, the 10th Amendment says the federal government is a government of enumerated and limited powers.
Right.
Everything else is to the state. And they're sort of cut into our territory. So we can't let them do that.
And we're going to talk about that. You have 54 lawsuits pending on the Minnesota Litigation Tracker. So for the people at home, you can follow along. This is a handy website. We'll put the link up for you. And you can see all the pending lawsuits. You can click on them and you can see some of the contents. But if you're like, I don't have time for that, I don't want to read, we're going to learn a little bit about some of those lawsuits. So what do you have on deck? Can you explain how the work is happening? How do you manage those 54 lawsuits? And how do you manage that workload, and what are some of the most important highlights?
Yeah, so it's the state of Minnesota is a sovereign entity. The federal government is sovereign, the state of Minnesota is sovereign. The state of Minnesota predates the United States of America, although our state is younger than we're 1857, the states predate the United States. And so when the states came into association under the umbrella of the United States, it was under certain conditions, which is that we keep our sovereignty, you do your thing. Now, the Supreme Court, the United States government is supreme in the areas that they run, like immigration is one of them. But what the federal government cannot do is, one, it cannot just after Congress has allocated money, they can't just say, the president can say, we're not doing that anymore. So that would be an arbitrary use of executive authority.
Because that power belongs to Congress.
Because that power belongs to Congress. They cannot take agency action, which is arbitrary and capricious. If they exceed their authority, that's a fancy Latin term. It's called ultra vires.
Okay.
Say it with me now.
Ultra vires, break
Right.
it down for us.
Well, what it means is that the federal government is gone beyond their allocated authority.
Okay.
And so, for example, if we go back to January 2025, the president says, you know that birthright citizenship thing written about in the 14th Amendment? We're not doing that. Well, yes, we are. You know, we took him to court and we're winning so far. The matter has only been touched on procedurally in the Supreme Court,
But the case is still pending.
but the case is pending, but
Okay.
every court that has touched it has ruled in our favor.
Okay, that's good.
And when the Supreme Court did touch it, they said that nationwide injunctions, they're not illegal, but they felt that the district court was doing it too much.
Okay.
But we did have the district court find that in this case of birthright citizenship, it was appropriate. The next one was this case involving impoundment.
Okay.
The federal government, the Trump administration, tried to stop all spending in every federal program, period. We went to court, we stopped them, we turned that all around, got the money flowing again.
Okay.
Well, then we went from there to the National Institute of Health. He said, well, that money, we're not giving it to you, we're not giving it all to you. We said, well, yes, you are, you know?
And
So-
what does that money fund, so that people can understand? Because sometimes you hear all these different agencies, and one thing that governments may not do a good job of is explaining the work that they do and
Right.
how it affects our lives.
Right. Well, the NIH grants that we've had to have 2 lawsuits around those. They fund hospitals, clinics, and do medical research on critical issues. You know, everything.
Like breast cancer.
Breast cancer, you name it. Chronic illnesses, acute illnesses, all kinds of things, really. And, you know, our research institutions in Minnesota is renowned for medical research.
Yep.
Depend upon that money. And the rest of the country depends upon Minnesota getting that money. And so we went to court when they tried to just cut our allocation, along with several other states as well. And then there was the more recent ones this fall involving supplemental nutrition assistance, what we used to call food stamps.
Sure.
And the president said, well, we're just gonna cut those. I'm like, no, you're right. So we went to court, went on that one. And then on food grants, housing grants, all kinds of things that we've had to just take the president to court about. You know, like even things like Head Start, even things like Job Corps, AmeriCorps. We've got to sue them over that. And because the president, and here's the thing about the presidency, not this president.
Right, the presidency
The
as
presidency.
an office.
Right. So when we think of the separation of powers, we say there's the executive branch led by the president, legislative branch, that's how Congress and the Senate, and we say there's the courts. And they're all three, and they have checks and balances on each other. Another check and balance is something called federalism, which is state
Which is
versus
states.
federal power.
Right.
So there's a lot of, so the way we keep our government honest is everybody has a little bit of power over everybody else.
Everybody has a little piece of the pie.
Right. So nobody can say, all mine. Well, the president's trying to say, all mine. The president, well, the recent tariff case, it was the Democratic attorneys general, including Minnesota, that sued the president, that said that he had abused his power when he just took power to himself to declare emergencies and therefore raise tariffs on everybody, go to the Davos and say, tariff on you, tariff on you, tariff on you, tariff on you. You can't do that, you know what I mean?
Right.
And
You need Congress for that.
You need Congress for that. Of course, he's back up to his old tricks, even after the Supreme Court said, don't do it. But it was the DemAGs that sued him over that. That was our case. And so
you're banding together with other states.
we're banding together,
To basically,
hold the president accountable.
and manage the workload of all of these lawsuits.
Very
So
much
you're sharing
so.
the load.
But
across-
just to let everybody understand, the president has the power to sign bills into law,
Mhm.
but the president doesn't have the power to tax, to make spending decisions, and a tariff is a tax.
And those powers are typically held with the purse, which is held with
The Congress. So he's trying to take unto himself the power to do Congress's job and execute. And then he threatens and bullies the judges, tells them he's gonna impeach them, calls them names, says they're, all kinds of stuff, which is in a way to intimidate them, and then he appoints only loyalists there. So he's trying to, in my view, collapse all authority unto himself
and erode the separation of powers.
and erode separation of powers so that there's no separation of powers. He's got the power.
And if there's no separation of powers, we're not in a democracy anymore. And League is a big champion in democracy, and we're going to pivot to what makes a democracy, which is voting and elections. And so we have lots of platforms about voting,
Sure
which would make sense when we're called the League of Women Voters.
That's
would
right.
make sense, right? We're all about voting. And part of what we want to do is we really want to enhance voter participation and engagement. These are key issues. So to that end, we have seen news reports recently, right, that the federal government has asked Minnesota to turn over its voter records.
No.
And can you help
We
people
ain't doing
understand why that's significant? Like, who runs elections in this country?
Well, the states do.
The states do.
And by the way, it's usually our secretaries of state.
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota has an exceptionally good secretary of state, fellow by the name of Steve Simon.
I know that guy.
Yeah, he's a good dude. And I bet you probably had him on your show, or
Well, not on our show, but we have had him down here to talk
Okay,
to the
good.
people of New Ulm,
Yeah,
which was
yeah.
great.
It sounds like it. So,
Or he might have been.
yeah, but one day maybe. But the point is that voting is very significant, and the president has taken a number of steps to try to erode state authority around voting. For example, earlier this year, he tried to issue an executive order that you can only vote if you have a birth certificate or proof of birth. No, that's wrong. We just went to court, we won. We've already won on that one. So when he says recently he's gonna nationalize elections and require voter ID, no, he isn't.
And there's a bill, though, that passed the House. It's been under different names. It's the SAVE Act is what it's
Yeah.
called. And it does a number of things in that bill. And I want to just
Let's
lay
go
those out
into it.
for
Let's
people
go
so
into
that
it.
people kind of understand what's in that legislation.
Yeah.
So the first key thing is that it requires voters to provide documentary proof of citizenship in person using a passport or original birth certificate before they are eligible to vote, and a voter ID at the time of voting. The second thing it would do is it would eliminate online voter registration, which Minnesota has a exceptional online voter registration system.
Yeah.
And then third, it will require birth certificates to match a current passport or real ID's driver's license name. And that is significant because for a number of the population, primarily women, change their name upon getting married, and so therefore their married name would not match their birth certificate.
Right.
So explain how this legislation would it make elections more secure?
No, it would not. Well, the whole thing about the birth certificate issue is the presumption, which is false, that voter fraud is usually done through voter imposterism, right?
Right.
So when people commit voter fraud, it's almost never that they're posing as another person. That's just generally that's not how it really happens. It happens in other ways. And it has been known to happen. We have to work hard to safeguard our elections, but requiring everybody to have this identification, all it's going to do is cut people out who don't have those things.
And is it true that we already have laws in place that prosecute voter fraud?
Yeah, and we do.
And do you think those are sufficient?
Absolutely, because when we have run the numbers, and the groups like the Brennan Center and folks who are watching should check this out, have looked at this, there's the imposter voter fraud is such an infinitesimal number.
Right.
We're going to exclude people who are valid and legitimate voters who just may not be able to put their hands on a birth certificate.
An original birth certificate.
An original birth certificate, simply because 1/100% of people voted in the name of somebody they weren't. And we do catch these people, and we do prosecute these people. These cases are, these are enforced. And like, there's this other presumption that there's all these undocumented immigrants who are voting. This is just not true. It's just untrue.
So it's a falsehood,
It's a
basically.
completely false, and these kind of ID requirements exclude vast numbers of people who are lawfully allowed to vote, and they don't really solve any existing problem. As a matter of fact, if you ask the people who promote these ideas, show us why we should do it. What, because we want to fix a problem, show us the problem. They'll say, well, we don't really, you're right. They'll concede that we're right, but just in case. No, that's not going to work. So I have consistently opposed these very strict voter ID laws because they're not necessary. There's no justification for it. They would exclude large numbers of people.
And arguably, if you're excluding large numbers of the population, do you have a representative democracy?
You do not. You do not. You have something else, right?
Right. You have something very different.
But you don't have a representative democracy.
Mhm. And the league has studied voter fraud. We do different studies where
Sure.
we collect, and we have interviewed all of the county officials, and what we heard by and large in this area is that we don't have a voter fraud issue, but we do have a voter suppression problem.
Right.
So getting access for people to vote. And so that's why the league has many positions and platforms where we're trying to champion
Sure.
people to be able to vote legally.
Right.
That's what we want, but we also want to make that accessible to them so
That's-
that we
yeah,
have a more
absolutely.
representative democracy.
Well, see, the thing is, the league starts from a fundamental premise, which is different from some of the people promoting some of these, you must have a original birth certificate. The league starts from the presumption that you want people to participate
We
in
do.
democracy. But these other folks start from the premise that they don't want people to participate.
Sure.
They're trying to exclude people from voting. And by controlling the electorate, they think they can control the outcome.
So you have a case pending on that Minnesota litigation tracker, and it is called, let me just look at my notes here, California et al. Versus Trump. And this is under the topic, so that this litigation tracker is really nicely sorted.
Yeah.
So it's under the topics of elections and voter suppression. Can you explain that case and Minnesota's position?
Well, I mean, it depends, I don't always know them by name. So we have a few cases.
Or you can
Yeah.
talk generally too
Right,
about
right,
the voter
right.
suppression.
Well, I can
cases
talk
you've
about them
done.
all, but like the name of the case.
Sure.
So we have this case about when Trump trying to use an executive order to require proof of citizenship.
Sure.
We also have the case where the Trump administration is trying to make us turn over our voter files.
Mhm.
The voter files case is important because this is private, personal, individual data that voters share and are promised will be kept, confidential, and the federal government is saying, give it to us.
Sure.
Because what they want to do is run it through some sort of massive AI thing to find who they think is supposedly an ineligible person. But that's their purported reason. That's what they claim to be their reason. I'm not sure that's really what they plan on doing.
We don't necessarily know what.
We don't know what
happens
they're
with
doing,
those
but we do know that this is proprietary information that we promise voters will be kept secret and will be kept private, and so we're not gonna violate people's privacy that way, so we're not handing all those voter files.
And because of federalism, states run elections.
States run
Which
elections.
helps also keep the process fair, so
Right.
that the very people you're electing in that national system or the federal government
Right,
aren't the same people who are running the election.
right. So I tell you, I used to think we need to have more national, standards in elections. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't ever have any. They should be carefully debated in Congress.
With
But-
many voices.
With many voices. But having highly diffuse election systems actually provides, the duplicativeness, the redundancy
Mhm.
actually provides for security and actually makes it pretty hard to rig a national election. And it's because it's decentralized.
Right.
And I think that that's a good thing. Again, it can be frustrating. It'd be nice to have a standard ballot,
Sure.
rather than a butterfly ballot there, and another kind of ballot there, and another kind of ballot. But it would be, but the truth is the diffused and highly spread out way that we do elections is actually a strength of our system. But that's what that lawsuit's all about. It's about protecting voter information and protecting the privacy of our citizens.
Okay, all right, we're gonna switch gears a little bit here. I'm gonna turn my notes page. There we go. Okay. This is a sensitive topic. We're gonna
Okay,
shift
let's
gears
do it.
to, but I wanna talk to you a little bit about the ICE surge in Minnesota.
Yes.
So in the past couple of months, we have seen unprecedented numbers of
True.
immigration and border patrol agents in the state.
You are right.
And we have also seen widely different news reports about what's actually happening here and an
Right.
incredible amount of civilian footage documenting
Right.
what's happening here. Like
Right.
incredible engagement by Minnesota citizens wanting people to know what is happening here.
Sure.
So first and foremost, I want to start with, why Minnesota? Do we have a large number of people without legal status who have committed violent crimes that would draw this surge into Minnesota?
No, we do not. In fact, every explanation for why Minnesota that has been given by the federal government is provably incorrect. Let's start with the ones you mentioned.
Okay.
We're 28th in terms of our population of undocumented people. There are 27 states that have more undocumented people than Minnesota, including Texas and Florida, and even Utah.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's a new one for me.
yeah. I mean, we are fairly in the middle, actually a little less than, lower than the midpoint when it comes to undocumented immigrants in our population. And
28th, you said,
28th,
out of 50.
50.
Okay.
So do we have a lot of folks who immigrate to the United States in various ways? Yeah, we do. 28th is not 50th, and even 50th has immigrants, right?
Sure.
But no, we're right there in the middle. So it wouldn't make any sense, right? And certainly we don't have more. Our undocumented folks are not more violent. In fact, immigrants and including undocumented people have a dramatically lower crime rate than native-born Americans do.
Mhm.
Now, does that mean no immigrant ever committed a crime? Of course it doesn't mean that.
Right.
There are people who have. But if you compare averages, native-born people have higher crime rate than immigrants do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we can go into more, I mean, like they said it was because of fraud. There's been a lot of talk
Right.
about fraud in the news.
Right.
Well, if that were the case, why wouldn't they send us accountants
Mhm.
or, I don't know, computer scientists or something to help us deal with the problem? No, they said armed, masked men
Mhm.
with guns. That's what they did. So that's not helping fraud. In fact, their conduct has led to a mass quitting
Mhm.
of federal assistant U.S. attorneys, including people who were working on fraud. And not only has it led to their mass quitting because, the federal government said that they were not going to investigate the death of Renee Good, but also it has resulted in a dramatic increase in habeas corpus petitions, which immigrants get to file if they believe that they're improperly and illegally detained in their person. So it's despite the number of applications, which they cannot ignore, habeas petitions, and they have, and much of our fraud enforcement has really slowed down because of the mass quitting that people have done.
And what you're describing there too, and I think this is a common point of misinformation, so if you can help us clear this up. So regardless of whether or not you are here legally, you are afforded some rights in this country.
Absolutely. And we're part of international treaties
Mhm.
that our Congress has passed, which require that if somebody has a good faith and well-founded beliefs of persecution in their home country, then they can seek asylum here,
Sure.
right? And people do. And I mean, look, you imagine an immigrant or an undocumented person or someone who comes into the United States from, say, Venezuela.
Sure.
Well, our country, our head of state kidnapped or arrested or went and got the head of their country And so we must assume that some kind of danger was going on there, because why else would we
How else
arrest,
would we do that?
arrest them? But yet we're telling Venezuelan asylees who have filed a petition, who may have a work permit and a social security number,
Sure.
so they're not undocumented. They're now afraid that if they get arrested, they're gonna be dragged down to the Whipple building and maybe they'll get out, maybe they won't.
Right.
So it's not just people who came across the border and have no paper at all.
Right.
There's a lot of gradations of people who are between an undocumented immigrant who just came across the border and somebody who's a citizen. There's permanent residents, temporary residents, student visa, work visa.
There's a lot of classifications.
There's a lot of
for
classifications
being here legally.
for being here legally, and yet all of those people are terrified.
And regardless, there is something called due process.
Due process.
Under the Constitution of the United States. Now, who is afforded the protection of due process? Can you explain a little bit
Everyone.
what that is?
If
Okay,
you're here,
regardless,
you get due process.
and that's it.
You do, absolutely, and if you're here, you get due process, and so they can't just throw you out without a hearing with nothing, right? There's gotta have to be you're gonna have to appear in front of some neutral who's going to evaluate your claim, and they might rule for you, then you get to move forward, and they might rule against you, then you gotta go. But this is the process, right? This idea that we're gonna just scoop people up and throw them on the other side of the border, that's not an American idea.
Right, that's not due process.
Right.
So what are you and your office doing to protect Minnesotans during this difficult time? Are there things that you're doing, and what issues are you seeing and challenging in court?
We're doing around 4 things. One, we are a law firm, and we have lawyers, legal investigators, paralegals, legal secretaries, all that. So we are filing lawsuits. The 54 lawsuits
Right.
are to protect the budget of Minnesota, the people of Minnesota, our rights. We're doing that quite a lot. The other thing that we are doing from the Attorney General's office is a lot of know your rights. Meaning, we're telling people what their rights are. We're telling people what's the difference between a administrative detainer and a judicial warrant. They're not the same.
Right.
One you must follow, and the other one,
One is signed by a judge, and
Yes.
one is signed by agency administrative officials.
right. And it essentially is a request, right? On a government agency in Minnesota. So we're helping people understand, know your rights, what your obligations are, what your responsibilities are. We're also, we put up a portal where we are collecting people's stories and wanting to know what's going on with that. And then we're going out across Minnesota and talking to wide numbers of Minnesota about things face to face, so they can ask us questions, so we can share with them what we're doing. And so that's kind of what we're doing, you know?
Sure.
And we're also, people should know that people are very concerned about the homicides involving Renee Good and Alex Preddy, and the shooting of a gentleman named Mr. Sosa,
Yes.
who he survived. But we are working with the Hennepin County Attorney's Office in partnership to bring truth and justice to that situation. And so we're busy on multiple fronts.
And would you say how that's being handled now? My understanding, and there are varied news reports, right?
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that Minnesota, in some sense, has been shut out of those investigations. Is that normal?
In every sense, yeah.
Or is it more normal that the federal government and the state government would work together to investigate?
It is normal and everyday and quite routine for state and federal investigators to work together. That is the presumptive way. We work with them, we work with the, and when I say we, I mean us state officials. The Bureau of Criminal Apprehension in Minnesota works with FBI all the time, DEA all the time, gun officials like ATF, who regulate firearms, tobacco, and explosives. We work with them all the time. There are a lot of state and federal joint task forces where you would have sheriffs and cops and troopers on the task force with federal officials. This is the default normal way that we do business. This idea of excluding state investigators from an investigation that involve the death of a Minnesotan is highly unusual. In fact, the state, remember we're talking about the dual sovereignty?
Yes.
The state has a critical interest in the, in protecting our citizens from crime as much as the federal government does. The federal government has limited powers in criminal enforcement. It needs to be within their jurisdiction.
Sure.
Now, sometimes they are overlapping,
Right.
but normally, you know what's normal? Normally, the state goes first.
Sure.
So a lot of people know about the George Floyd case.
Yes.
You notice how the state prosecuted first, then the feds did. That's normally how it goes. People understand that the police powers, when I say police powers, I don't mean, flashing lights and, men and women with, badges and guns.
Sure.
What I mean is the general authority to regulate life.
Right.
And that could involve, the DNR, it might involve local police, it might involve any kind of thing that we do to make sure that we manage the lives of Minnesotans, public services, every state has them. Those kind of police powers are regarded as plenary, meaning widespread, and general, and reserved by the states. We're the ones who license police officers, license doctors, license nurses, license cosmetologists, license, security guards.
Sure.
This is a state function.
There's a role for the state to play in investigations
Critical,
like this.
and arguably the first role,
Sure.
right? Not that the feds don't have a critically important role, but like when did federal police powers really, and criminal investigative powers really step up? Well, the states have been prosecuting crime ever since states existed. The federal government got into it when we created the Department of Justice under Ulysses S. Grant, which was designed to actually protect the newly freed people who were subject to mistreatment by some of the states that they lived in.
Right.
That's the original purpose of the United States
The
Department of
pursuit of
Justice. Right. That's why it was founded.
See, I didn't know that.
Yes.
All
Important
right.
fact.
That's we covered a lot there.
Sure.
You mentioned some of this last section. We're gonna pivot again. You mentioned
Pivoting.
some of this last section already earlier, but I
Okay.
just wanna see if there's anything else you want to weigh in on. So we talked a little bit about federal government funding freezes and changes.
Yep.
And you have several lawsuits on the litigation tracker related to this, and you mentioned some of them. You mentioned Head Start, some of the other ones that I saw in there. AmeriCorps, yep. Women's health care provided by
Yes.
Planned Parenthood, wind
Yep.
energy development. What else do you want people to know and understand about these funding freezes and how they may disrupt services?
Well, what I want people to know about them is, number one, Minnesota's entitled to this money. Congress has decided Minnesotans should have this money and therefore they should have it, and the president doesn't get to say, you don't get it. The president certainly doesn't get to do that based on his own subjective, like, I don't want you to have it because you didn't vote for me. You can't do that. That would certainly be arbitrary. I want people to know that Minnesota pays more into the federal government than we get back.
We do. We're one of the net positive
We're a
states,
net,
is what you're saying.
we're a net donor,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of the states that are not net donors, they're not persecuted and targeted the way Minnesota has been. I mean, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, and I love those states. I got family in all those states, but they get more money from the federal government than they send in tech. And so, so basically taking our money means that they're depriving us of resources that that's our money, that they're denying us from access to and benefit from. And then I just want them to know that all in, it costs the state about $250,000 a year to pay the salary and all the benefits of one of our typical lawyers or staff members.
Sure.
And so we're all in. We're about $1 million a year for the group that's doing federal stuff, and some of those folks are there through through grants and stuff like that. And yet they have helped us get well over $2.5 billion back from the federal government.
So there's a huge difference between the salary for an individual lawyer versus the money that they're
Right.
getting back
So
for the people of Minnesota.
Right, so
Okay.
I've been asked, Megan, and I tell you this, because people say, well, how much does it cost, to do all this litigation?
Sure.
Well, it does cost something, it's not free, people
Sure it
said
does.
that, people aren't doing it on a pro bono,
Yeah.
they got salaries, they got mortgages. But the number that we spend in salary and time is infinitesimally small compared to the tremendous amount of good that these folks have done for the state of Minnesota.
And they're also taxpayers,
And they're taxpayers too.
and they're consumers in the state as well.
Absolutely,
So-
absolutely. And I will tell you that some of these folks, and I won't name their names because of their privacy rights, but the fact that the federal government has made working conditions intolerable for workers at the United States Attorney's Office has been to the benefit of the people of the state of Minnesota through the AG's office, because we've hired several.
So now we're getting highly trained and skilled staff
Yeah.
who can make sure that we retain dollars that have been promised to Minnesota and set aside by Congress, which
Right.
is their power to do.
That's right. That is exactly right. So I just want people to hang in there with us. I wish I didn't have to sue the president, but he keeps on breaking the law. So I'm willing to sue him as many times as he breaks the law. It doesn't bring me any great joy to have to sue the president, but I just can't sit by and let him break the law like that. We've won about 80% or more of our cases.
And some of them are still pending.
And
And,
so- and
and
they're
that's what
pending.
it's about for you. So
Yeah.
I'm hearing you say it's really about upholding the rule of law.
It's about upholding the rule of law, protecting the rights of Minnesotans, protecting the constitutional framework of the Congress.
Sure.
I mean, even if Congress does not assert their authority, which they could do a better job at, it's still my job to make sure that the president doesn't trample their authority. So like in the tariff case, Congress could have said, hey, wait a minute, that's our job, you can't, but they won't. So what we've said is, actually the president is usurping the authority of Congress. I'm hoping somebody over there will wake up and start grabbing their authority back, because the system requires every part of the system to sort of jealously guard their authority.
So there's checks and balances.
So there's checks
So
and
you're
balances.
exercising your authority to do a check and a balance.
That's absolutely right.
All right. Well, we're gonna leave it there
Well, thanks.
for today.
What a
It has
pleasure.
been a delight to have
Yeah.
you, sir.
You're good at this
Um,
interviewing stuff.
I mean, thanks so much for your time and dedication. I'm sure it has to be exhausting when I see how many cases are in that.
Oh, we're
litigation
having a good
tracker.
time. We're having a good time.
But we appreciate you being here tonight. This has been the New Ulm Forum. We'll catch you next time.